Good evening, dear listeners, and welcome back to another Miss Marple mystery. I'm Davis, your host by the firelight. Tell me, what's your favorite Christmas dessert? Plum pudding, mince pie, or something secret from your own kitchen? Share it in the comments. I love seeing your traditions. Tonight's tale begins in street, Mary Mead, where a holly wreath hangs bright, but beneath its berries, something dark waits to be found. The smell of pine smoke drifted softly through the sitting room. Miss Marple sat near the hearth, trimming a cluster of holly leaves. Her scissors clicked in calm rhythm. Outside, the faint murmur of voices carried from the lane, cheerful, familiar, perfectly ordinary. Street Mary Mead was busy that morning. The church fundraiser was only a day away. Everyone wanted their display to outshine the rest. And at the center of it all stood Mrs. Finch, organizer, judge, and self-proclaimed expert in wreath design. Mine will be the finest yet, Mrs. Finch had declared at the grocer's. Last year, Mrs. Tapping glued her berries. Imagine glued. The story spread as quickly as butter gossip on warm toast. By midday, the whole village knew of it. Miss Marple smiled faintly. Such things amused her. Small rivalries often revealed large truths. And human nature, she often said, never failed to entertain. A knock came at the door. Light, hurried, familiar. "Come in," Miss Marple called. Lady Bantry entered, cheeks flushed from the cold, her fur collar dusted with frost. "Oh, Jane," she began, "the village is in uproar. You'd think the Queen herself were judging holly wreaths." Miss Marple gestured to the kettle. "Sit, dear. Have a cup before your nerves freeze solid." Lady Bantry laughed, though her eyes didn't quite join in. She accepted the tea, staring absently into the fire. Miss Marple noticed that faint pause before each sentence, the hesitation of someone carrying a thought she'd rather hide. "You seem distracted," Miss Marple said gently. "Is something troubling you?" "Oh, it's nothing," Lady Bantry replied quickly. Then, after a small sip, "Well, perhaps not nothing. A letter, actually. Or rather, the absence of one." Miss Marple looked up. "A letter?" "Yes. I wrote to Mrs. Finch last week. Personal matter. She hasn't replied." Her fingers tightened around the cup. "And now she avoids me altogether, pretends she's busy with the competition." Miss Marple tilted her head. "Curious." Bantry sighed. "She's been secretive lately. Keeps something locked in her little shop drawer. The post office girl mentioned it." Miss Marple said nothing. Her scissors rested on the table. Outside, a church bell chimed slow, uncertain, as though even time had caught a chill. Bantry rose to leave. "I'm being silly," she said, "but it unsettles me. That woman never misses a chance to talk, and now she can barely meet my eye." Miss Marple smiled kindly. "Silence, my dear, is far more telling than chatter." When the door closed, she returned to her holly, trimmed one leaf, then stopped. Something in Lady Bantry's tone lingered a tremor between words. The smell of pine smoke deepened. The fire hissed softly. Miss Marple stared into the flames, thoughtful. A missing letter, a nervous friend, a woman avoiding conversation. Her knitting needles lay still beside the chair, and in the silence that followed, even the clock seemed to listen. By afternoon, that silence would turn into a scream. The bell stopped mid-ring. Just one half-note hung in the air, then silence. A cold hush rolled through the village green. It began with a scream from the vicarage yard. High, sudden, frightened. Then another voice joined Mrs. Thomas, shouting for help. Miss Marple was already on her feet. She set down her teacup, reached for her shawl, and stepped outside. The morning air bit against her face. One sensory cue, the faint scent of wet holly. It clung to the wind like perfume from another hour. Down by the church gate, a small crowd was forming. The Christmas market stalls stood half-decorated, ribbons fluttering weakly in the frost. And near the steps of the vicarage, Mrs. Finch lay sprawled beside her wreath stand. Her arms were limp. Her bonnet had fallen aside. Around her broken twigs, spilled ribbons, crushed holly leaves. A teacup lay shattered, still steaming. "Fetch the doctor," someone shouted. "No, fetch the constable," another cried. Constable Slack arrived within minutes, breath puffing white in the cold. He pushed through the gathering. All right, give her air." His tone was steady, but his face had turned pale. Miss Marple stood back. She watched. Every detail. The way Mrs. Finch's fingers curled slightly inward. The faint stain on the edge of the saucer. The untouched mince tart beside her plate. The constable knelt. Checked the pulse. Nothing. He frowned, straightened slowly, then looked to the vicar. "Heart attack? Perhaps," Slack muttered. "Too much excitement over wreaths." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. She stepped closer, careful not to disturb the scene. "May I?" she asked quietly. Slack hesitated, but moved aside. Marple bent near the fallen wreath. Her fingers hovered above the pine needles. Something glistened a drop, faint and amber, caught in the holly leaves. She did not touch it, only looked. Then she followed the trail to the broken teacup. The liquid had spilled onto the stone, leaving a faint sugary scent, but beneath it, something sharper. Brandy. Yes, but not only brandy. Something bitter underneath, something that did not belong to Christmas tea. Behind her, whispers rippled through the villagers. She was fine just a minute ago. She laughed. She was laughing. Maybe she slipped. Miss Marple stayed silent. Her gaze drifted across the faces. Guilt, fear, confusion. Mrs. Finch's daughter stood near the steps, white as paper, hands clenched tight, eyes fixed on nothing. The vicar crossed himself. Slack shook his head. "Doctor's on the way," he said. "We'll get her covered." Miss Marple rose slowly, her voice calm, measured. "No, Constable," she said softly. "This was no accident." Slack turned sharply. "What's that supposed to mean, Miss Marple?" She looked down at the broken holly wreath, at the dark stain spreading beneath it. Her eyes were clear, steady. "It means," she whispered, "the wrong tea was served." And the wind carried her words through the silent square, like a warning that had arrived too late. Constable Slack began his questioning before the doctor even left. The villagers had gathered again, half curious, half afraid. Chatter moved like smoke through cold air. One sensory cue, the sharp scent of spilled tea mixed with pine sap. It lingered on the stones where Mrs. Finch had fallen. Slack cleared his throat. "All right, everyone. Let's have some order here." His notebook trembled slightly in his gloved hand. "Mrs. Lucas, you were nearest, weren't you?" Mrs. Lucas nodded quickly. Her voice quivered. "She'd just poured her cup, Constable. Said she'd earned a sip after all that work. Then she took one drink and—" Her hands flew up helplessly. She made a sound like she couldn't breathe. Lady Bantry spoke next, pale but composed. "I was standing near the pastry table," she said. "There were 3 cups, not 2. One was meant for me, I think. But Mrs. Finch took it first." Her voice trailed off. Marple watched her eyes. Guilt flickered quick, like light on glass. Slack wrote it down. 3 cups. Noted. Anyone touched the cups before that? Mr. Prowse, the church caretaker, cleared his throat. "She had words earlier," he muttered. "Sharp ones. With that young post office girl, over wreath entries. Said something about disqualification." Marple looked at him gently. "Who was the girl?" "Her daughter, Miss," he said quietly. "The same one standing there." All heads turned. The girl stood by the doorframe trembling. She clutched her shawl, avoiding every eye. Marple studied her shoes, small, black, scuffed. The soles gleamed wet under the lamps. Melted frost. "From where?" Slack stepped forward. "Miss Finch, can you tell us what happened?" The girl swallowed hard. I brought her the holly from the shed," she said. "She asked for it, right before the tea." Her gaze darted to the table, then away again. "I didn't see her drink." The constable sighed, rubbing his temple. "Did you notice anyone else near the table?" "No," she whispered. Her fingers twisted in her scarf. "But there was something small. She dropped it, I think." Marple's eyes followed her gesture. Near the corner of the table, half hidden beneath a napkin, something glinted. Slack bent down, lifted it with his pencil. A tiny glass vial. corked, empty. The crowd leaned closer. Slack's face hardened. Who does this belong to? No one spoke. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. The vicar murmured a prayer under his breath. Lady Bantry stepped back. Mrs. Lucas crossed herself. Slack held it higher. Someone knows, he said. But silence thickened like fog. Then a gasp broke it. The Finch girl's face turned white. Her knees gave way. She collapsed against the pew, fainting dead away. Marple moved first. She caught the girl's arm before she hit the floor. Her eyes flicked again to the shoes, frost melting into tiny puddles. Water, clean and cold, from the shed, or farther. She straightened slowly, her voice quiet, certain. She's been somewhere she shouldn't. And the room fell silent again, as if the truth itself had stopped to listen. The vestry was quiet, too quiet. Miss Marple closed the heavy oak door behind her. The noise of the crowd outside faded into distant murmurs. Only her own steps remained soft, measured, deliberate. One sensory cue, the chill of cold stone underfoot. It crept through her shoes like a whisper. The church smelled faintly of polish and candle soot. Morning light slanted through the stained glass, painting the floor in dull reds and greens. For a moment, she simply stood still. Silence had its own voice if one listened closely enough. Her eyes swept the small room, the vicar's desk, a stack of hymn books, a scattering of pine needles near the wall from wreaths carried in earlier. But something else caught her attention. A small shape near the altar rail, white against the dark floor. She stooped slowly. A sprig of mistletoe broken, half crushed. Odd, she thought. It hadn't fallen by chance. Someone had stepped on it in haste. Her gaze followed the direction of the marks, footprints faintly outlined in dust. They led to a narrow table near the vestry window. And there, tucked beneath an old service book, was an envelope. Half hidden, slightly burnt at one corner, as if someone had tried to destroy it, then changed their mind. She picked it up carefully. The paper was warm to the touch, recent. Inside, a folded note, scorched along the edge. Only part of it remained. If you tell her the truth, and nothing more, the rest gone to ash. Miss Marple frowned softly. The handwriting was familiar, thin, elegant, slightly slanted. She had seen it before, on Lady Bantry's Christmas cards, on a list of donations pinned to the vicar's door. But what truth? And who was her? She folded the half-letter again, slipped it into her small notebook, behind a page of grocery notes. Then, quietly, she straightened. Her eyes moved toward the vestry. Window. Outside, faint movements, the constable's hat passing, villagers murmuring. None of them saw her here. Good. Sometimes, it was easier to see when unseen. A sound broke the stillness. Soft, slow, footsteps. Not Slack's heavy boots. These were lighter, measured, confident. They drew closer, the rhythm deliberate, not hurried, not hesitant. Someone who knew where they were going. Miss Marple turned slightly, her hand resting on the desk. The door creaked open. A shadow stretched across the stone floor. She did not speak. The footsteps stopped just behind her. Then, a calm voice, smooth, polite, but edged. Looking for something, Miss Marple? She didn't turn. Her expression remained mild, her tone gentle. Just the truth, she said softly. But the silence that followed told her she had already found trouble, and whoever stood behind her had found her first. The tea steamed between them. 3 cups. No one touched theirs. The rectory, drawing room felt heavy. Too much warmth, too little comfort. One sensory cue, the faint hiss of the kettle cooling on the hearth. It sounded like a quiet argument still breathing in the corner. Constable Slack leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. He looked tired, frustrated. The doctor says poison, he muttered. Brandy laced with something. Can't name it yet, but not natural. Lady Bantry sat across from him, gloves still on. Her posture neat, her eyes restless. She kept stirring her tea, though she hadn't added sugar. I can't bear it, she whispered. Mrs. Finch was difficult, yes, but murder? In the middle of Advent? Slack sighed. I don't care what season it is, milady. Someone slipped her the poison. He turned to Miss Marple. You were nearest after it happened. You must have seen something. Marple looked at the fire. The flames moved slowly, calm as her thoughts. I saw what everyone else saw, Constable, she said softly. But people notice things differently. Slack frowned. I'm not in the mood for riddles. Marple smiled faintly. Observation isn't a riddle, it's habit. He grunted and flipped through his notebook. Right then, let's go through them again. The daughter, the gardener, the organist. Lady Bantry flinched. The organist? Oh, surely not. Why not? Slack snapped. He had access to the church hall, helped set up the tables. Means opportunity same as the rest. Marple didn't speak. Her knitting lay untouched beside her chair. Slack's voice filled the pauses. The gardener, Abel nervous as a hare, claims he was trimming holly at the back. No one saw him. Convenient. Bantry shook her head. Mrs. Finch trusted him. She said he was steady, reliable. Reliable men make the best liars, Slack said flatly. Marple finally looked up. Constable, she said, you're assuming this was meant for Mrs. Finch. Slack blinked. Well, who else drank it? That, she said gently, is precisely what troubles me. Lady Bantry's spoon clinked against her cup. She wasn't supposed to drink it, she said under her breath. Both heads turned toward her. She froze, color rising in her cheeks. I only thought perhaps the cups were mixed. Marple's gaze sharpened. The cups were mixed, she repeated softly. How do you know that, Lady Bantry? Bantry's lips parted. I don't. I only guessed. Slack set down his notebook. Hold on. What's that supposed to mean? Bantry shook her head, flustered. She poured the tea for me, I think. I can't be sure. Miss Marple leaned slightly forward. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Then who, she asked, was supposed to drink it? The fire crackled once sharp, loud, final. No one answered. Only the kettle hissed again, like it knew the truth before any. Two of them did. The garden behind the Finch cottage was still damp from the morning frost. Miss Marple walked slowly along the narrow path, her shoes brushing fallen pine needles. The earth was soft beneath her steps, one sensory cue, the smell of damp soil rising in the air. It carried the weight of secrets buried deeper than roots. Mr. Abel stood near the shed, trimming what little remained of the holly. He didn't notice her at first, or pretended not to. When he finally looked up, his face tightened, polite, but uneasy. Morning, Miss Marple, he said quickly. Didn't expect company. Not today. I imagine not, she replied mildly. Everyone's been quite shaken. He nodded, snipping a branch too fast. Terrible business it is. Poor Mrs. Finch, good woman, kept things tidy. His voice rushed, like water down a drain. Too many words, too little breath. Marple watched him carefully. She was proud of her holly wreaths this year, I hear. Abel gave a short laugh. Proud? She was obsessed. Wouldn't stop fussing over berries. Said red ones weren't bright enough. Wanted something special. Something special? He hesitated. Yes, well, she sent me looking all over. Said she'd found a source, but didn't say where. Just told me not to touch her basket once she brought them in. Marple's eyes drifted toward the shed. The door stood slightly ajar. Inside rows of wreath frames half finished. On the table, a tin bowl stained a faint reddish hue. Where did the berries come from, Mr. Abel? He froze. His shears slipped from his hand, landing softly in the mud. What's that, miss? The berries, she repeated, gentle but precise. Those on the wreath she made before she died. They weren't the usual kind. Where did she find them? He looked away, swallowed hard. They weren't mine. Ah. The word hung lightly, but it landed heavy. Abel rubbed his hands on his trousers. She said she'd get them herself. Came back that evening with a basket full. Brightest red I ever saw. Almost too red. Marple's tone stayed calm. Did she say who gave them to her? No, only that they were special. Said she'd save them for the competition wreath. I didn't ask more. Didn't seem my place. Marple nodded slowly. Her gaze lingered on the shed table again. The stains, the empty bowl, the faint metallic scent beneath the soil. It wasn't only earth she smelled. She folded her hands. "Tell me, Mr. Abel, when did you last see her alive?" He shifted. "Yesterday morning. She came out here before the market opened, checked her wreath, took one last look, said she'd win for certain." He looked down. She didn't smile when she said it, though. Marple's eyes softened. "No," she murmured. "I don't suppose she did." She turned to leave. The air was heavy with damp and silence. Her mind, already, fitting the pieces together. Poison berries, perhaps, but not his doing. She glanced back once more. The wreath killed her, yes, she whispered under her breath. But the hand that mixed them wasn't his. The evening settled over Street Mary Mead like a shawl. Quiet, still, waiting. Miss Marple sat by her small fire, her knitting basket forgotten at her side. One sensory cue, the crackle of the flames. It filled the silence between thoughts. Outside, the frost had begun to creep against the windows, thin and white as lace. On her lap lay the half-burned letter. The edges curled inward, blackened and crisp. She had read the same sentence a dozen times. If you tell her the truth, and then nothing, the rest lost to ash. Her spectacles slid slightly down her nose. She didn't push them back. Her eyes traced the ink again, slow, patient. The strokes were familiar, elegant, controlled, and written by someone used to authority. Lady Bantry's handwriting. She was sure of it. Miss Marple had seen it many times on invitations, charity lists, and church donations. It carried that same small flourish on the letter R, a habit born of fine schooling. And now, it sat before her, half destroyed and half revealing so. The missing correspondence Lady Bantry had mentioned wasn't lost. It had been hidden, and Mrs. Finch had kept it. But why? Marple leaned back, fingers steepled. She thought of the day's conversations, Slack's impatience, Bantry's nervous slip, the gardener's stammer. The village was full of fear, but fear alone never killed. Something deeper was at play, something planned. The flames snapped sharply. A piece of log broke apart. She watched the ember crumble to grey. So simple, one small thing burning away, leaving only what refused to disappear. Her mind lined up facts quietly. A letter written by Lady Bantry. A vial found by the tea table. A wreath decorated with foreign berries. A missing husband. And now, one woman dead who should never have taken that cup. She picked up her notebook, opened it to the page where she had hidden the letter. Beside it, she wrote 2 words in her tiny, neat script, "Truth traded." The sound came then. Soft, deliberate. A knock at the door. 3 times. Even rhythm. Not the constable too polite for him. Not Lady Bantry too late for her. Miss Marple rose slowly, smoothed her skirt, and crossed the room. The fire hissed again, like a warning. She opened the door. The vicar's wife stood outside, wrapped in a shawl, her breath a cloud in the cold. Her face was pale, eyes wide. "Miss Marple," she whispered, voice trembling. "You'd best come quick." Marple tilted her head. "Why, what's happened now?" The woman glanced over her shoulder as if afraid of being heard. "They've found another vial," she said. "This one, behind the church organ." Miss Marple's expression didn't change. But her hand tightened on the door. Another vial. Another secret. The fire behind her snapped once more, and the shadows on the wall seemed to lean closer, waiting for what she would uncover next. The night came down heavy over Bantry Hall. The snow outside softened the world, but inside tension clung like smoke. Miss Marple sat near the fire, hands folded neatly in her lap. One sensory cue, the faint rattle of china cups. It was the only sound that dared move in the room. Lady Bantry had insisted on tea, perhaps to calm her nerves, perhaps to pretend that life still followed its usual rhythm. The silver tray gleamed between them, cups, saucers, cream, and a neat sugar bowl. The maid, Elsie, poured with careful grace. Her hands shook slightly. Marple noticed. Bantry did not. I can't stop thinking about it, Lady Bantry whispered. Poor Mrs. Finch. Such a dreadful way to go. I keep seeing her face. Marple looked at her gently. Guilt. Does that, my dear? Even to the innocent. Bantry frowned. Surely you don't mean... A sound cut her short. Porcelain clinked against the tray. Then fell. Then shattered. The maid gasped. Her teacup had slipped from her hands. She stumbled backward, choking fingers at her throat. Her eyes widened. Her body trembled. And then she collapsed. The scream tore through the room. It wasn't hers, it was Lady Bantry's. The same pitch as before, the same fear rising again. "Fetch help," she cried. "Now!" Marple was already beside the maid, her movements calm, precise. The same signs: tremor, breath failing, cup overturned. The tea soaked into the carpet, spreading like a shadow. Constable Slack arrived moments later, breathless and angry. "Not again," he barked. "What is wrong with this cursed tea?" Marple didn't answer. Her eyes swept the table. The pot was still half full. Steam rose gently. She bent closer, sniffed once. Then again. Brandy. Faint, but not as strong as before. The scent was missing its weight. Altered. She straightened slowly. Her gaze moved from the pot to Lady Bantry. "You poured it yourself?" Bantry shook her head quickly. "No. I asked Elsie to. She's been my maid for years. She knows how I like it." Slack rubbed his chin. "Then how in blazes did it happen again?" Marple spoke softly. "The tea again," she said. "But not the same hand poured it." Bantry's voice wavered. "You mean someone meant to harm me?" Marple didn't reply. Her eyes were fixed on the tray, the cups, all nearly identical. Only one had a faint chip on its rim. The one Elsie used. The one standing nearest Lady Bantry's seat. She stepped closer to the window, watching the reflection in the glass. The snow glowed pale outside, hiding everything it touched. Inside, nothing was hidden at all. She spoke quietly, almost to herself. "Someone is copying murder." The words hung in the time-brossed air like breath on glass, cold, fragile, and fading too slowly to ignore. The Finch girl sat in the parish office, trembling. Her hands were clasped tight in her lap. Her eyes red, swollen, refused to look up. Constable Slack stood over her, notebook in hand, jaw set like stone. One sensory cue, the faint ticking of the clock above the door. Each tick sounded louder than the last, each one a question she didn't want to answer. "All right, Miss Finch," Slack began. "You've told us 3 different things already. Let's start again." He flipped a page. "Did you, or did you not, pour that tea?" The girl shook her head. "No, I swear I didn't." Her voice cracked. "I only fetched the holly. I wasn't near the table." Slack frowned. "You were seen near the table." "That was after," she cried. After Mother." Her words broke apart. Miss Marple sat quietly in the corner. She hadn't spoken yet. Her knitting. Needles rested in her lap, unmoving. She watched the girl's shoes instead. They were the same ones as before, scuffed, still damp at the seams. A faint ring of frost marked the floor where she Saturday. Marple leaned forward, voice soft. "Then tell me, my dear," she said, "if you never touched the tea, why were your shoes wet?" The girl froze. The ticking of the clock seemed to stop with her. Her breath hitched. She began, then stopped again. Slack slammed his notebook shut. "Well?" Tears slid down her cheeks. She buried her face in her hands. "I can't," she whispered. "She told me not to." Marple's voice was barely a whisper. "Who told you?" "My mother." The words dropped into the air like stones into still water. "She said if anyone found it, they'd all know." "Know what?" Slack demanded. "What did you hide?" The girl sobbed harder. Her shoulders shook. "I didn't mean to do wrong," she said. "She was scared, that's all. She said she made a mistake." Marple's tone stayed calm. "What mistake, dear?" The girl hesitated, then whispered. "She told me to bury something behind the shed." What something? Slack snapped. The girl pressed her lips together. Her voice came small. A box. Just a little box. She said it was wicked to keep it. Marple's eyes narrowed. Her mind moved quickly, the wreaths, the berries, the letter. What did she want hidden before she died? The girl lifted her face. Her eyes were wide, full of guilt and fear. I don't know what was inside, she said. I swear it. But she said if anyone saw it, everything would end. Slack grunted. Everything's ending anyway, he muttered. Miss Marple stood slowly. Her gaze softened, but her words were sharp. Constable, she said, we'll need to see that box. The clock ticked again. Once. Twice. Outside, the church bell tolled in the distance low, mournful, final. And in that sound, Marple knew whatever had been buried wasn't meant to stay hidden for long. The garden behind the Finch cottage was dark and silent. Frost shimmered faintly across the grass, pale as dust in moonlight. Constable Slack held a lantern high, the beam slicing through the mist. Miss Marple stood beside him, her coat buttoned neatly to the throat. One sensory cue, the crunch of frozen soil beneath their boots. Each step broke the quiet like glass. The Finch girl watched from the doorway, eyes swollen from tears. Lady Bantry stood further back, shawl pulled tight, face white as linen. No one spoke. They all waited for Miss Marple to point the way. She said she buried it behind the shed, Marple murmured. Her breath fogged the air. Slack grunted, shovel in hand. Best not waste time, then. He drove the blade into the ground. The soil resisted at first, stiff, frozen at the top. Then it gave way. A dull scrape followed. Something soft. Something not quite earth. Here, Slack said, crouching. He brushed away dirt with his gloved hand. A shape emerged round, uneven, bound in twine. A wreath, half burnt, half intact. Holly and ivy fused together, blackened along one edge. The smell of char clung to it, sharp and bitter. Lady Bantry gasped. Good heavens, why would she burn it? Marple knelt beside it. Her eyes caught a glint among the scorched branches. Something metallic, small and tied with string. A key, tiny, tarnished, worn from use. She lifted it gently, holding it up to the light. Slack frowned. That what she buried? No, Marple said softly. She buried the wreath to hide this. Slack turned the key over in his palm. Doesn't look like much. A drawer key, maybe. Marple's gaze didn't leave it. Her mind was already moving. A letter. A missing husband. Money unaccounted for. A woman too frightened to tell the truth. Lady Bantry stepped. Closer. Jane, what does it mean? Marple stood, slipping the key into her pocket. Her tone was quiet, almost kind. It means Mrs. Finch was afraid, she said. Afraid of something that could be unlocked. Slack scowled. Unlocked? A box? A cupboard? What are we chasing here? Marple looked toward the dark shape of the cottage. The light from the kitchen window trembled. Her expression softened. She didn't hide an object, Constable, she said. She hid proof. Proof of what? Slack demanded. Marple's voice lowered. Of a debt, one that never should have been owed. Lady Bantry's face drained of colour. What sort of debt, Jane? Marple turned to her, eyes steady. The kind that ruins the living and tempts the desperate. Slack sighed, shaking his head. You talk in riddles, Miss Marple. Not riddles, she said quietly. Reminders. She looked again at the blackened wreath. Its edges smouldered faintly in the lantern glow, as though memory itself still burned there. Her voice fell to a whisper. The key doesn't open a door, she said. It opens a debt. And as she spoke, the wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of ash and something older, like secrets stirring beneath the frost. The next morning broke grey and still. Fog drifted low along the lane as Miss Marple made her way to the bank. Her pace was unhurried, her gloves neatly buttoned, her expression unreadable. One sensory cue, the faint metallic jingle of the doorbell as she entered. The sound lingered in the quiet hall like a small echo of suspicion. Mr. Lenton, the village banker, looked up from his desk. A tall man, stiff in posture, too tidy for comfort. He adjusted his spectacles when he saw her. "Ah, Miss Marple," he said carefully. "Ah, what an unexpected pleasure. Good morning, Mr. Lenton." Her tone was warm, polite, and deceptively light. "I fear I must trouble you with a small inquiry. It concerns Mrs. Finch." At the mention of the name, his hands paused over the ledger. A fraction of a second, but Miss Marple saw it. That tiny stillness spoke more than words ever could. He cleared his throat. "Yes, of course. A tragic business." His fingers turned a page too quickly. "What exactly would you like to know?" "Her accounts," Marple said softly. "I understand she handled her finances herself. She was careful, wasn't she?" "Careful? Indeed, yes. Quite so." His tone tightened. "She deposited modestly, withdrew small sums now and then, all quite regular." Marple murmured. Her eyes drifted to the columns of ink on the open ledger. The entries told their own story. Neat, cautious handwriting, steady rhythm. Until recently. "There seems to have been a change," she said gently. "These recent withdrawals, rather close together." Mr. Lenton straightened in his chair. "Seasonal spending, no doubt. The Christmas fair, perhaps." "Perhaps," Marple said. Her gaze moved lower. A line near the bottom caught her eye. A larger withdrawal, days before Mrs. Finch's death. The notation beside it was underlined twice. One word, Bantry. She did not ask to read further. She didn't need to. She simply closed her handbag with a quiet snap. "Most helpful, Mr. Lenton," she said. "I'm sure the constable will find your efficiency most admirable." He froze again. His mouth twitched as if to speak, then decided against it. Marple smiled politely. Her calmness was unnerving. "I shan't keep you," she added, turning to go. At the door, she paused. The bell above her head chimed softly, the same delicate sound that had greeted her arrival. "I do so appreciate precision," she said without looking back. "It often leads one straight to the truth." Then she stepped out into the fog. The cold air felt sharper now, as though it knew what she had just confirmed. Lady Bantry's name, written in Mrs. Finch's bank ledger. The link between money and silence now visible at least to her. Miss Marple walked slowly down the lane, gloved hands folded neatly. She said nothing, but her thoughts were steady and sure. The motive was no longer hidden. It had been written in plain ink all along. She glanced back once toward the bank's frosted window and whispered, almost to herself, "Money borrowed for silence." The wind carried the words away like the echo of a truth no one wanted to hear. The lamps were lit early that evening. The snow outside had thickened, muffling every sound. Inside Bantry Hall, the world was warm and tense. Miss Marple sat opposite Lady Bantry at the long table, the tea tray between them. One sensory cue the faint rattle of the teaspoon against porcelain. The sound betrayed nerves that words could not. Lady Bantry's hands trembled as she poured. The teapot spout wavered. Hot water splashed across the saucer. She didn't notice, or perhaps she did and couldn't stop herself. "Jane," she said softly, "why are you looking at me like that?" Marple didn't answer at once. Her gaze rested on the steam curling from her cup. "Because you're afraid," she said gently, "and fear is very rarely misplaced." Bantry flinched. "I have every reason to be afraid," she said. "People are whispering. The constable keeps coming back with questions. And now," her voice faltered, "now you." Marple's tone stayed even. "I only ask questions when the answers already exist, my dear. They simply need to be spoken aloud." Bantry stared down at the tablecloth. The silence stretched until it hurt. Finally she whispered, "You found it, didn't you? The key?" Marple nodded once. "Yes, behind the shed." Bantry's eyes closed. When she spoke again, her voice broke. "Yes, she knew about my husband's debt." Her fingers clutched the edge of her cup. "She was blackmailing me." The confession came out like breath after drowning. She said she'd tell the whole village. Said he borrowed money from her from the postal fund. I begged her to keep quiet. She agreed, for a price. Marple watched her quietly. No shock, no judgment, only understanding. How long had it gone on? Months, Bantry said. She grew greedy. Every visit she wanted more. She enjoyed it, the power of it. Then last week she threatened to speak if I didn't pay again. She looked up, eyes shining with tears. So I paid. The note in the ledger proves it. Marple's voice was calm. And afterward, Bantry's hands trembled. I thought it was finished, I swear it. I didn't touch her. I didn't go near her that day. I only prayed she'd keep her word. The tears came then, slow, quiet, helpless. I couldn't kill her, Jane. I couldn't even hate her properly. She ruined me, yes, but I pitied her. Marple leaned forward slightly, her tone softened. I believe you. Bantry blinked. You do? Yes, Marple said. Because you were never the only one she held in debt. Bantry stared at her. What do you mean? Marple rose, adjusting her gloves. Someone had moved beyond guilt now into protection. She had more than one secret, Marple said softly, and someone else decided to keep yours safe. Bantry's breath caught. Who? Marple's eyes lifted to the window. The snow fell heavier, covering every trace of the path below. She spoke barely above a whisper. Someone else protected you. And outside, the wind rose as if to erase the truth before it could reach the door. The yard behind the cottage was alive with voices. Boots scraped the frozen ground. Lanterns swung in the fog. Constable Slack stood near the shed, his hand gripping Mr. Abel's arm. The old gardener looked pale, confused, cornered. One sensory cue, the low rustle of frostbitten leaves in the wind. It whispered around them like something that didn't want to be heard. Enough talking, Miss Marple, Slack snapped. We've got him. The man was here. He had access to the berries. He buried the wreath. Case closed. Marple's tone was calm, unhurried. Closed, Constable? So soon? And with so many questions unopened? Abel shook his head, voice breaking. I didn't mean no harm, miss. I just did what she told me, that's all. I didn't kill her. Slack's jaw tightened. She told you to bury poison? That doesn't make sense. She told me to hide it, Abel cried. Said people would misunderstand. Said she'd made a mistake and didn't want anyone blamed. Marple stepped forward slowly. Did she say why? He looked down. No, only that it wasn't her doing, but she seemed scared. Slack scoffed. Scared? She was the one holding debts over half. The village. Marple's voice stayed gentle, but it cut through the cold. She was protecting someone, Constable. That's not the behavior of greed. It's the mark of fear. Slack turned to her, exasperated. Then who, Miss Marple? Who was she protecting? Marple's eyes shifted toward the cottage door. The Finch girl stood there, shawl clutched tight, watching everything. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow. Marple's tone softened. Come here, my dear. The girl hesitated, then stepped forward. Her shoes crunched on the frosted ground. She wouldn't meet Marple's eyes. You said your mother told you to bury something, Marple said. Yes. And that she told you to say nothing. The girl nodded. She wasn't hiding poison, was she? A tear slipped down her cheek. No, ma'am. Marple took a slow breath. She was hiding a person. The girl's lips parted. Her eyes widened. The truth trembled behind them like a trapped bird. Your mother protected someone, Marple said softly. Who? The girl began to cry. She said he'd come back. She said I mustn't tell. Tell what? Marple pressed. The girl shook her head wildly. She made me promise. Not until it was safe. Who, child? The words came out in a whisper, a confession swallowed by cold air. My father. Slack frowned. Your father's dead. The girl's voice broke. He's not. She sobbed, louder now. He came back last week. Mother hid him in the old stables, said no one could know. Slack's eyes widened. Good Lord. Marple closed her notebook slowly. Her voice dropped to a whisper. So. The ghost of Mr. Finch walks again. The wind picked up, whistling through the broken branches. Somewhere behind the shed, a door creaked open, soft, slow, like someone listening just out of sight. and Miss Marple turned her head slightly, knowing the next voice she'd hear would not belong to the living. The fog lay thick across Street Mary Mead. Houses blurred into pale shapes. Lamplight floated in the mist like ghosts unsure of where to rest. Miss Marple moved slowly along the lane, shawl wrapped close. Each step pressed soft into the frost. One sensory cue, the dull clang of a gate chain swinging in the wind. It echoed once, twice, then stilled. She followed the sound, past the vicarage, past the frozen hedges that bordered the churchyard. Somewhere beyond the wall, a figure waited. A man, broad-shouldered, coat torn, face grey from cold and something older than fear. He stepped forward when he saw her. Miss Marple. Her voice was calm, even in the fog. "Mr. Finch, I presume?" He lowered his head. "So you know. I know your daughter said you weren't dead." He gave a rough laugh. That wasn't laughter at all. "Dead enough for the world," he said. "Better that way. I ran. I didn't mean to stay gone this long." Marple's gaze didn't move. "Your wife hid you." He nodded. "She couldn't let them find me. The debts, the shame. Lenton at the bank wanted me jailed. Bantry owed me too, but she was kind enough to lie. My wife." His voice cracked. "She paid for all of it, every coin she could spare. Then she found a way out." Marple's brow furrowed. "A way out?" He looked toward the church steps. "She made something. Said it would end the misery. A poison. Said she'd use it if the constable came sniffing again. I begged her not to." He ran a shaking hand across his mouth. "She mixed it into the brandy, kept it in a small vial. Said if anyone asked, she'd pour it herself." Marple's eyes were steady. "She made the poison for you." He nodded. Tears froze on his lashes before they could fall. "She wanted me gone for good, gone quietly. Said she'd rather that than see me dragged through the streets again." He choked on the words. "I couldn't do it. I smashed the cup. Told her I'd work, beg, anything. I left the house that morning. When I came back..." He stopped. His shoulders sagged. She was already on the ground. Marple said nothing. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of wet leaves from the graveyard. The fog thickened, pressing close around them. "She didn't drink her own poison," Marple whispered. He looked at her, hollow-eyed. "What do you mean?" "She meant it for you," she said softly. "But someone switched the cups." The man's face went white. He staggered a step back, breath catching. "Who would—" Marple raised a hand. "Not who," she murmured. "When—" A distant sound broke through the fog, the clock striking midnight. Each toll rolled across the frozen fields like judgment. By the final chime, only her words remained. "The dead didn't kill, Mr. Finch," she said quietly. "But the living always have reason to. And somewhere, behind them, unseen in the mist, another gate chain clanged once like an answer. Bantry Hall was still. The lamps burned low, their light a soft gold over polished wood. Constable Slack stood near the hearth, arms folded, frown deepening with every word. Miss Marple sat by the table, her notebook open before her. One sensory cue, the faint crack of cooling embers in the fireplace. Each pop broke the silence like truth pressing to be heard. "All right," Slack muttered. "You said there were 2 cups. Explain that again." Marple adjusted her spectacles, her voice calm. "There were indeed 2 cups poured that morning," she said. "One for Mrs. Finch, one for her husband. She laced one with poison for mercy, not malice." Slack blinked. "For mercy?" "She believed death would save him from disgrace," Marple said softly. "She meant him to drink it before the constable arrived, but he couldn't. He fled instead." Slack paced. "So she poured a cup meant for a man already hiding, and then what? Drank it herself?" Marple shook her head. "No, constable. The poison never reached the hand it was made for, but it reached the wrong one all the same." Lady Bantry, pale but composed, whispered, "You mean someone switched them?" "Yes," Marple said simply. 2 cups, 2 hands." One moment of confusion. Slack frowned deeper. "Then who swapped them?" Marple's eyes drifted to the side, to the shadows near the hall door. The Finch girl stood there, silent, her hands gripping her shawl. Her eyes glistened. She'd been listening the whole time. Marple spoke gently. "You fetched the holly that morning, didn't you, my dear?" The girl nodded slowly. "Yes. And you brought your mother her tea." Her lips trembled. She said it was for him, for father, but she looked so tired. I thought she needed it more. Slack straightened. "You switched the cups?" The girl began to cry. "I didn't mean to," she sobbed. She wouldn't eat, wouldn't rest. I thought it would help her calm down. She said one was special. I didn't know it was poison. Lady Bantry covered her mouth. The air seemed to grow smaller, tighter. Only the fire moved, flickering like breath. Marple rose slowly. She crossed to the girl, placing a steady hand on her arm. Her voice was soft, but each word landed like a verdict. "You thought you were saving her," she said. "But in trying to save her, you gave her the cup meant for another." The girl sobbed harder. Slack rubbed his temples, muttering, "Lord above." Marple turned toward him. "No crime of hatred here, Constable. Only a tragedy of love and fear. The wrong act, done with the right heart." Slack exhaled. "So all of it started with one small mistake." Marple looked at the fire again. The embers dimmed, their red glow fading to ash. Her voice came low, final. "No," she whispered. "It started with silence, and silence always finds a voice." The Finch girl lifted her head slowly. Her tears shimmered in the firelight. "Will they forgive me?" she asked. Marple's eyes softened. "That," she said, "depends who you mean, the living or the dead." And the fire gave one last crack, sharp and clear like the sound of truth sealing itself shut forever. The rectory was silent. The storm had passed. Only the faint drip of melting frost tapped against the window pane. One sensory cue, the steady tick of the mantel clock. Each beat marked the weight of truth about to surface. The Finch girl sat at the small table. No tears now. Her hands folded neatly before her, pale and still. Constable Slack stood by the door, arms crossed, but quiet this time. Miss Marple sat opposite, knitting resting in her lap, eyes calm and kind. "Tell me," Marple said softly, "why did you think you had to end it?" The girl's voice came low, level, like a confession rehearsed too many times. "She was cruel," she said, "always. To father, to me, to everyone. Nothing was ever enough. She'd shout, scold, curse the day. When she found out about the debt, she changed. She wasn't mother anymore. She said the world owed her." Marple didn't interrupt. She let the silence breathe. The girl's voice grew steadier. She said father was weak, said she'd make it right her way. I told her to stop. I begged her to let it go. But she laughed. She said the only justice left was death. Slack shifted, uneasy. She meant her husband's death? The girl nodded. "Yes. She mixed something in his tea, said it would be quick. She even smiled. But when he wouldn't drink it, she went mad. Threw the cup. Said the poison was wasted." Her breath caught. "I was afraid. I thought she'd drink it herself out of spite. So I took the cup away. I poured her a fresh one and left them on the table. She came back later. I heard the crash. Then the scream." Marple leaned forward slightly. Her tone stayed quiet. "You did not kill her, my dear." The girl blinked. "But I switched the cups. I thought—" "No," Marple said gently. "You only moved her cup." Slack frowned. "Is there a difference?" Marple's gaze was steady. "A very great one." She turned to the girl again. "When you poured the new tea, you left the poisoned cup beside it, yes?" "Yes." "And when your mother returned, she poured her own drink?" The girl hesitated, then nodded slowly. "She always did. Said no one made it right but her." Marple's voice lowered. "Then it wasn't your change that killed her. It was hers." The girl stared. "I don't understand." "Your mother poisoned the wrong tea herself," Marple said. "She meant it for your father, but poured from the wrong pot. She drank her own punishment." The girl's lips parted. For the first time, there was no sob, no denial, only shock. "She did it herself?" "Yes." Marple whispered. She ended the cruelty she created without ever knowing she had. The clock ticked once more, loud, final. Slack exhaled, rubbing his brow. Good Lord, after all that fuss. Marple rose, smoothing her skirt. Tragedies seldom need villains, Constable. Only mistakes. The girl looked up, tears returning, but softer this time. What happens now? Marple turned toward the window. The frost outside gleamed faintly in the fading light. That, she said quietly, depends on what she left behind. And just as she spoke, the church bell tolled once low, hollow, and perfectly timed, as though the dead had just agreed. The drawing room at the rectory felt heavy with the weight of the night. The frost outside had turned the windows to silver. Inside, every sound was too loud, every silence too long. Constable Slack stood by the fire, his cap in hand. Miss Marple sat opposite, calm as ever. One sensory cue, the faint hiss of a dying log in the hearth. It sounded like a sigh from the room itself. "All right," Slack said finally. "Let's have it clear, Miss Marple. Start to finish." She nodded once. Her notebook rested open on her lap, neat handwriting filling the page. "It's quite simple, really," she began. "Mrs. Finch intended to poison her husband." Lady Bantry gasped softly. Marple continued unhurried. "He had debts, deep ones. He faked his death to escape them. She knew. She paid off part of what he owed, and she hated him for it. When he returned, she saw ruin coming back through her door." Slack frowned. "So she planned to finish it?" "Yes," Marple said. "She prepared a cup, laced with poison. Her husband couldn't bear to drink it. He ran. In his absence, she panicked. She believed the constable would soon learn the truth about her, about him, about the debts. So she drank instead." Bantry's voice wavered. "She killed herself?" Marple's eyes softened. "Not by intent, by fear. She thought she was silencing scandal. Instead, she silenced her own heart." Slack exhaled sharply. "And the rest of it? The wreath, the vials, the gardener's mess. Blind trails," Marple said. "She hid the evidence to protect her husband's name. He hid himself to protect her memory. And all the while the truth waited for the fog to lift." Bantry pressed a hand to her chest. "And the money." Marple looked to her. "That was your secret, not hers. The payment in her ledger was no crime, only a kindness turned costly. You tried to help the wrong soul." The room went still again. Slack shifted his weight, his usual bluster gone. "So, no murder?" Marple closed her notebook softly. "No murder," she said. "Only foolishness in too many directions." She rose, adjusting her shawl, her voice almost kind. "Human folly, Constable. It always tastes like brandy." Slack looked puzzled. "Brandy?" Marple smiled faintly. "The same cup, the same scent, the same mistake." He stared at her, half admiring, half weary. "Every time I think I've seen it all." "Ah," she said quietly. "That's when the world surprises you." The fire gave one last hiss, then faded to ember. Outside, the frost began to melt under a weak grey dawn. But in the soft light that crept through the window, the truth lay bare, ordinary, tragic, and terribly human. And for a moment, no one spoke, as though the whole village, at last, could rest. The morning sun crept through thin curtains. The long night was over. Its silence broken only by the faint clink of porcelain. One sensory cue, the warm smell of toasted bread drifting from the tray. Miss Marple sat in Lady Bantry's sitting room, her shawl folded neatly. Across from her, Bantry poured tea with a sigh that came from somewhere deep. Steam curled between them, pale and lazy. "So," Bantry said softly, "it's finished then?" Marple nodded once. "As finished as such things ever are." Bantry stared into her cup. Her hands trembled faintly. "Do you ever get used to it, Jane?" she asked. Her voice barely rose above the ticking clock. Marple's eyes softened. "Never," she said, "because people never change." They sat quietly a moment. Outside, a milk cart rattled past the gate, life returning to the village. Bantry managed a small smile. You make it sound inevitable. In a way, Marple murmured. She stirred her tea slowly, watching the ripples fade. Goodness dies quietly, my dear. Guilt lingers longer. Bantry looked up. Do you think the daughter will ever forgive herself? Marple's reply was gentle. She already has in her silence. Regret is a kind of penance, don't you think? Bantry leaned back, letting the warmth reach her, to face. And Mr. Finch? He'll vanish again, Marple said. Men like that always do. But the truth will stay here, in whispers and gossip, much like the scent of this toast. Bantry gave a faint laugh. Then I suppose you'll have to stay too to keep us in line. Marple smiled faintly. Perhaps, she said. But even Street Mary Mead needs its little mysteries. They remind us how thin the line is between kindness and carelessness. The clock chimed the hour. Marple rose, adjusting her shawl. Bantry watched her with quiet admiration. I don't know how you do it, Jane. Marple paused at the door. Neither do I, she said softly. But I suspect it has something to do with tea. Bantry laughed, the first true laugh since it began. The sound followed Marple out into the morning light, soft as smoke and just as fleeting. Davis's voice returns, warm and familiar. Well then, dear listeners, could you have guessed before Miss Marple did? He laughed softly. Was it the wreath, the cup, or the letter that betrayed the truth? A pause, gentle, lingering. She saw it all, of course. Every clue hiding in plain sight. The sound of a faint chuckle follows. And next time a stranger in the pews, and a name that shouldn't exist. The fire crackles. Davis's tone softens, like a friend bidding good night. Until then, keep your tea warm. A beat. Tomorrow, another kettle will boil.